Clara Denton used to believe that quiet meant peace. There was a time when her small, weathered house on Maplewood Lane in the town of Bayport hummed with life. The old copper kettle seemed always poised to sing. The radio whispered soft, familiar tunes in the background, and the very walls still carried the faint echo of a young boy's laughter, chasing a father's hurried footsteps down the polished wood of the hallway. In those early days, her husband, Richard, would race home. He'd park carelessly in the driveway, stumble through the front door with wind-tossed hair and a wide, unguarded grin, often calling out that the evening light was too beautiful to waste indoors. He smelled faintly of fresh coffee and the ozone scent of his engineering office. His briefcase would drop by the door as if he couldn't bear even a moment's delay. He would sweep their son Ethan into his arms, and the three of them would sit on the back steps, sharing melting fruit pops and silly, half-finished stories. Back then, the silence between them was warm. Pauses were filled with shared glances, easy, understood smiles, the soft clink of spoons against porcelain bowls. Quiet was a safe, warm blanket wrapped around their small family. But now, quiet felt more like a locked room. The house was still the same, a square of sturdy, aging brick, a porch with flaking white trim, a tiny herb garden clinging stubbornly to life. But the energy inside had shifted. The evening hush wasn't restful anymore. It was sharp. It pressed against Clara's ribs, making her chest feel crowded and hollow all at once. It was the quiet of 1,000 words that should have been spoken and never were. Richard came home much later. Now, if he came home at all, his tailored suits were sharper, his leather shoes newer and more expensive, his cologne stronger and completely unfamiliar. His phone was an extension of his hand, always lit, always vibrating messages, emails, calls, at odd hours. His attention lived somewhere far away, in places she couldn't see, and conversations she wasn't part of. He would enter through the front door with the same key he'd used for 20 years, but he carried himself like a distant visitor. A quick nod, perhaps a muttered, "Hey," and he would drift immediately toward the home office, his eyes flicking past her as if catching on something insignificant behind her shoulder. When she asked how his day went, he'd answer with a single word, productive, and that would be that part too. The unseen shield. Ethan, now 22, was nothing like the toddler who used to spill juice on the couch and apologize with a sticky, gummy smile. He stood taller than Clara by a full head, his shoulders broad, his dark, wavy hair often tousled from his habit of running his fingers through it when he was lost in thought. His voice had deepened since those early days, but it still carried the same genuine warmth. He had her eyes gentle and watchful, and Richard's old habit of noticing small details. He had finished his university degree and returned home, claiming it was temporary, just until he saved up money and figured out his next big step. Clara knew better. She'd seen the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, the way he listened for the distant sound of Richard's engine each night, and then glanced toward her face if the driveway remained empty. He wasn't just saving money. He was staying to shield her from a loneliness he didn't know how else to fight. One cold Thursday night, the rain came down in fine, icy threads, tracing shimmering lines down the window glass. Clara stood at the kitchen sink, staring at her reflection in the darkened window pane. The fluorescent light overhead hummed softly, casting a tired, clinical glow over the room. Her reflection startled her. Faint, etched lines around her eyes told a story of years spent squinting into worry and forcing bright smiles. The oversized, comfortable sweater she wore hung loose. It had once been Richard's favorite on her, back when he noticed such things. "When did I start looking like this?" she whispered, the words barely more than escaping air. The clock above the stove blinked midnight. The house creaked softly with the shifting wind. Richard hadn't called. He usually sent some late, obligatory text and excuse about a meeting that ran long, or a client who needed something urgent. Tonight, there was only silence. Footsteps padded softly behind her. "Mom," she turned. Ethan stood in the doorway, framed by the dim hallway light, one hand clutching a folded fleece blanket. He looked tired, his hair tousled, a hint of stubble along his jaw. There was a protective softness in his gaze that instantly reminded her of the boy who used to climb into her lap after nightmares. "Why are you still awake?" he asked gently, stepping into the kitchen. "I could ask you the same," she replied, forcing a small, weary smile. He walked over and carefully draped the soft blanket around her shoulders. The fabric smelled faintly of detergent and the spicy cologne he'd used since high school. "You'll catch a chill standing here by this drafty window," he said. She pulled the blanket tighter around her. "I'm fine, sweetheart." His gaze flicked toward the empty front door, then back to her face. "Dad's not home," he said quietly. "It wasn't a question," she replied, trying to sound casual. "He's busy at the firm. You know how it is." End of quarter push. Ethan's jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing faintly in his cheek. "You deserve more than this," he said, the words almost under his breath. Her chest constricted as if his words had suddenly hooked into something soft and fiercely hidden inside her. No one had said that to her in such a long time. Not her friends, who had drifted away over the years. Not even herself, in those quiet moments before sleep. "I'm okay," she insisted, though she knew it wasn't true. His eyes stayed on her, unwavering. In them, she saw the boy who used to believe she could fix anything, and the man who now saw all the cracks she tried to conceal. "Get some rest, Ethan," she said softly. "It's late." He hesitated, as if he wanted to say more, then nodded. "All right, good night, Mom, good night." When he left the room, the silence pressed in again, but something was different. His concern lingered in the air, a gentle wait, a reminder that someone in this house still saw her as more than a fixture in the background. She felt the warmth of the blanket, a small, tangible act of love that felt so rare. Part 3. The proof of betrayal in the morning. The rain had softened to a mist. The house smelled faintly of burnt coffee. Clara entered the kitchen to find a clean mug on the counter and a small, folded note propped against it. "Don't forget breakfast. Love you, E. She picked up the note and traced the letters with her thumb. Such a small thing, a scribbled reminder. A mug left ready yet, it warmed a place inside her that had grown cold from neglect. The front door opened with a reluctant squeak. Richard stepped inside, the air around him carrying the sharp scent of car leather and a perfume she did not recognize. He set his travel bag down with a dull thud and tossed his keys onto the counter without looking at her. "Did you wire the property tax payment?" he asked, his voice flat, already moving toward the hallway. No greeting, no explanation for the empty side of the bed. "It's on autopay," she said quietly. "Good," he replied, already scrolling through his phone. "We don't need the city shutting anything off." His collar was slightly crooked. There, just at the edge of the white fabric where it brushed his neck, was the faint, pink smudge of lipstick, a color she hadn't worn in years. Her stomach twisted. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. She gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. Richard didn't notice, or if he did, he chose not to. She said nothing. The words she wanted to scream, rising and receding like a painful tide. Later that afternoon, while the house settled into a weekday hush, Clara sat on the front steps, a mug of lukewarm tea cradled in her hands. Ethan joined her. "Do you ever think about just starting over?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely louder than the rustling leaves of the maple tree. Ethan turned to look at her, surprised. "Starting over how? I don't know. A new town, a new life where no one knows your history, where you're not someone's wife or someone's mother. Just you. Does that make any sense?" "Yeah," he said softly. "It does. You've spent my whole life taking care of everyone else. Mom, maybe it's time you take care of yourself." Just then, her phone buzzed on the step beside her. A notification from their shared credit card account. Richard Denton, Coastal Vista, in-room charge, guest Denise Alcott. The text was simple, transactional, brutal. It was proof, and unlike evasive words, proof didn't pretend to be anything else. Her heart hammered as she stared at the screen. She had known, deep down, but seeing another woman's name attached to their money, to their life, Denise burned into her memory. She pressed her palms against her eyes, willing the tears to stop. When she lowered them, Ethan was there, his face pale. "You okay?" he asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "He's at a hotel," she managed, her voice shaking. "With someone. Her name is Denise." Ethan's eyes darkened, his expression hardening into cold fury. "He doesn't deserve you," he said, the words edged with quiet anger. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking, "don't let this turn you bitter. Don't let what he's done live inside you like that. Hating him won't fix anything. It'll just hurt you." "How can I not be angry?" he demanded. "He walked away from you, from us, and you're still trying to protect him." She reached out and touched his arm lightly. "I'll be all right. I just need time." Part 4. The sun's bold step the next morning. Richard came home as if nothing had changed. Morning, he muttered, heading toward the kitchen. Where were you? Clara asked, her voice steady but low. Business trip, he said, not looking at her. At the Coastal Vista Inn, she added, with a guest named Denise Alcott. There was the briefest flicker of panic in his eyes, but he smoothed it over almost immediately. What are you talking about? You're blowing this out of proportion. It was a business dinner, that's all. A client who checks into a hotel under our card, she asked. Don't lie to me, Richard. Not about this. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, Ethan appeared in the doorway. Stop lying, he said, his voice low but clear, carrying the unwavering steel of an adult. Just stop. This is between your mother and me, Richard snapped, turning to face his son. Stay out of it. No, Ethan replied, stepping forward. Not this time. I'm not going to stand here and watch you tear her down and pretend everything's fine. Ethan, Clara said quickly, fear twisting in her stomach. Please. Richard pointed a finger at their son. You don't talk to me like that. I am still your father. Then act like it, Ethan shot back. The words hung in the air, electric and final. Richard's face went rigid with shock. He grabbed his coat from the back of a chair and headed for the door. You'll regret this, he said, not specifying who he meant. The door slammed behind him. Clara sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. What are we? She whispered. What's left of us? Ethan lowered himself beside her, leaving a respectful space, but his presence was solid. Maybe this is what it looks like when something that was already broken finally stops pretending it isn't, he said quietly. She looked at him through tear-blurred eyes. Start over with what? She asked. Everything feels shattered. Not everything, he said, meeting her gaze. There was a steadiness there that reminded her of the boy who used to build towers out of blocks and insist they could always be rebuilt, no matter how many times they fell. We still have this house, and we still have each other. That night, for the first time, Clara did not follow Richard. She didn't plead or bargain. She let the sound of his car fade down the street. She sat in the dim living room, her hands clasped in her lap. Ethan sat beside her, simply existing, warm, solid, and real. He reached out and gently took her hand. It was the kind of grounded, steady love born from years of shared moments. This isn't fair to you, she said, wiping at her eyes. You shouldn't have to be the one holding me together. You've spent my whole life doing that for me, he replied. I'm just returning the favor. Then we'll figure out how to carry them together, he said, until you're ready to carry more of them on your own. Part 5. The call to action. The tone shifts to one of quiet power and resolve. In the days that followed, Richard's absence became permanent. There were no more empty promises. Clara knew she had reached the precipice. She had endured the silence, the neglect, and now the undeniable proof. The shame was not hers to carry anymore. One quiet Tuesday morning, as Ethan was in the garage fixing a faulty window latch, Clara walked into the home office, the room Richard had used to hide his secret life. She sat in his expensive leather chair, feeling the weight of the air around her. She picked up the phone. She didn't call Richard. She didn't call Clara. She called the number of a reputable family law attorney she'd found weeks ago but was too afraid to dial. My son took a bold step for me. Now, I have to take one for us both. Her voice, usually soft and hesitant, was steady. Hello, she said into the receiver. My name is Clara Denton. I believe I need to file for divorce. It was the first time she had used the word. It felt massive, terrifying, and utterly liberating. After the call, she walked into the living room, found Ethan, and simply told him. He hugged her hard, and in that moment, the anchor that had felt so broken was suddenly whole again. They began to work. The house became their project. Ethan finished painting the porch, replacing the old peeling white with a confident, gentle slate blue that made the house feel refreshed, almost hopeful. Clara dug out her old watercolor supplies she'd abandoned years ago and began painting coastal landscapes again. In the mornings, the quiet returned, but this time, it was a creative quiet. It was a shared, purposeful silence, filled with the sound of Ethan's tools tightening screws, and the soft rustle of Clara's paintbrush on thick paper. The house on Maplewood Lane still stood, but the energy inside was entirely new. It was no longer a house defined by betrayal and absence. It was a home being rebuilt, brick by emotional brick, by the unwavering love between a mother who rediscovered her strength and a son who showed her that sometimes the greatest act of love is standing up for the ones you cherish most. The old anchor had broken, but a new, stronger one had been cast. rooted in the unbreakable loyalty between mother and son, and that, Clara knew, was a foundation that would hold